My guest today is John Engates, and he's the field CTO for Cloudflare, a company that has a unique view of the world, and I mean that literally. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 20% or more of web traffic passes through their systems. Now, that means the company has a real breadth to what it does. And as I noted, John is the field CTO for Cloudflare, and I wanted to get a CTO perspective on security. And I thought, what better person to bring in to talk with? Welcome, John.
Hey, Jim. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
Me too. I've talked with you in the past, but tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've been in technology for many years. Started my career in the internet business as starting an ISP right out of college. That led me to become the CTO of Rackspace for about 18 years. Worked for NTT for a little while in a CTO role, helping build networks. And then about a year and a half ago, I joined Cloudflare as the field CTO. So that means I get to talk to IT leaders around the world about all the challenges that they're up against and they're trying to solve, and represent Cloudflare in that endeavor.
Okay. Now, I almost know what a CTO does. One friend told me they're like a CIO, only smarter. But I think he was taking a shot at me. Not a real definition. What is it that a CTO does that's different than a CIO?
Well, it's different in every company that I've been a part of. CTO sometimes is head of the product organization, building whatever the product might be. In a small SaaS company, for example, or a startup, the CTO might be the chief architect and might actually be writing code. Other larger organizations, the CTO might be doing what I do, which is sort of representing a technical product to a broad audience who needs a little help in sort of understanding that. And I would say it even differs within companies at different stages of the company. So it could be very internally focused at one stage and then start to become more externally focused as the company wants to get the message out. And the joke that I used to make about CTO is it stands for Chief Talking Officer or Chief Travel Officer, because I'm always on the road, always getting in front of folks, trying to explain things. And maybe that's what this hand waving is all about, is trying to explain something to folks. And, those could be internal or external folks. And it really differs at again, every stage in every company.
So the CTO's job is a little unique. And what led you to this job? What in your career path took you here?
Well, for me, Cloudflare is a very exciting company. They're doing some things that are truly unique. They've built some capabilities that I think every company is going to need as they continue on their digital transformation journey. And I have known Cloudflare for many years. They were a partner of mine at a former company, and we worked with them very closely. And when I started to think about the future and where things were headed, just the stars sort of lined up in terms of all the capabilities that we're building here and what I want to work on and what I'm excited about. So I want to try to find a job where I get to represent a set of capabilities and a product that truly excite me and I think the world needs.
And what's the relationship of the field CTO to the security stance of the company? Is that something, and obviously we'll talk to you about a field CTO, but what's the role of the CTO in terms of their contribution to the security profile of the company?
Not unlike any other employee in the company, we're all, number one, users of the security of the company. I mean, we are sitting in front of a laptop that is secured by our products and our services. We're also oftentimes representing the products that we deliver, which are cybersecurity focused products and services. And then, in my role, sometimes I'm even looking for ways that we can be more secure. And I'm listening to customers. I'm taking inputs from folks like in the audience here and learning from them and funneling that information back in. So I think everybody's got a role and a hand in security. Specifically me, it's maybe a little bit more focused because I'm visible and I'm involved in the internal and external conversations, but security is everyone's job.
So let's go back to your role as a field CTO, that you get to talk to a lot of people, hear their concerns, hear what they're doing about security. What are the things that are on people's minds right now?
Every company, I think, feels sort of some tension and some risk around security. They feel like it's kind of harder than ever to be secure. They feel like the conditions out there in the world have made it riskier to sort of be on the internet or be a company that's doing something in the digital realm. They're always kind of waiting for that day that they wake up that they've heard that overnight a big attack happened or somebody was compromised, or they're getting that message on their phone or their pager that they've got an incident going on. And nobody wants to be in the headlines. Nobody wants to be mentioned in the context of a data leak or a loss of somebody's private data. And I think everyone just is feeling that pressure to make sure that they don't end up in the headlines. And I think that's what I hear from a lot of folks.
Yeah, I think the job of security person is to keep you out of the news.
Keep you out of the news.
That's a really
right.
good definition.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about a couple of the key things that I'm hearing about. I'm sure you're hearing about. DDoS. It was there for a long time. Then it sort of disappeared off people's radar. And I think it's come back in a big way. Am I right on that?
Well, you're right. You're absolutely right. DDoS never went away. It's always been a real threat. It happens all the time, every day. The DDoS, that term stands for Distributed Denial of Service Attack. DDoS,
Thank you.
Yeah. So DDoS attacks are typically launched across the internet. They are launched from giant botnets. So hence the word distributed. They're coming from all over the place. And Cloudflare has been in the business of mitigating or blocking, filtering DDoS attacks. That's primarily the sort of origin of Cloudflare's helping prevent those kinds of attacks against websites, web properties. APIs are also a part of the attack surface. People are tending to, put more and more of their web infrastructure behind APIs because of apps and because of other services that consume them. And so therefore, those become another target for the attackers. And so DDoS is a growing problem, and it continues to be a challenge for companies.
I have to say, I've never figured out why people do this until ransomware became part of the issue. But before that, I can't figure out why people did DDoS attacks. Do you know?
Well, I guess initially when people started to do this, it was just cyber vandalism. It was kind of just like most people get, their first taste of hacking or cybersecurity in sort of some sort of script kiddie context. That was what I back in the very earliest days. Just trying to figure things out. Figure out how something works or if something could be done. I think it's moved beyond that by a large degree. I think nowadays it's a very real risk for companies that are building their businesses online and generating real revenue. Sometimes that it could be a potential for somebody to take out a competitor. If you have a competitor online, try to take them down. And when I say competitor, it might not be a business to a business. It could be a individual playing an online game that wants to knock down the gaming infrastructure so that someone else on the other side of the world that's a competitor has a hard time that day with their gaming infrastructure. We do see a lot of online gaming attacks. Crypto is another target of DDoS attacks. I think sometimes these are parts of larger attacks. These are not necessarily the end goal. It's maybe a distraction mechanism for another element of the attack. And then last but not least is the true ransom DDoS attack, where they're trying to extract a ransom either to stop an attack or to prevent an attack in the first place.
One of the things that I've noticed, and maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong on this, but the size and intensity of DDoS attacks seems to have increased enormously. Is that correct?
It has increased. In fact, just recently, February of 2023 timeframe, Cloudflare mitigated the largest DDoS attack in history. It was a 71 million requests per second attack. That's 35% higher than the previous record that was ever seen. And these attacks do continue to grow in intensity and duration.
And have the recent global conflicts spawned any greater DDoS attacks?
Well, I think absolutely they have contributed to DDoS attacks. I think what you're seeing is sometimes folks acting on behalf of what they believe to be a cause, launching attacks against other entities that they think would affect their cause in some way. So it might be cyber criminals associated with a particular country trying to take out critical infrastructure of other countries. We've seen attacks on airports, websites for airports, airlines. We've seen recent rash of attacks against hospitals and healthcare industry elements. So these are sort of targets that I consider critical infrastructure. And, it is not, contained to those industries. I mean, it's a broad swath of everything that's online. Gaming, we mentioned, energy, those are in critical infrastructure in addition to the healthcare folks, energy infrastructure. We mentioned travel, hospitality, hotels, people disrupting activities around holidays. Sometimes that's the hotels and airlines are part of that supply chain of travel. And so those become targets for disruption. And so we really have to think broadly across different industries and different parts of the world when we think about DDoS. They're not contained.
Let's talk about some of the other threats. Phishing is one of those fundamental things that never seems to go away. And I think recently, forget who it was that got hacked, and they got hacked by just one phishing episode where one of their staff gave away their credentials on what they thought was an internal site. Phishing just never seems to go away, does it?
No, and I think phishing will continue to grow in terms of the threat. I mean, it is the number one mechanism by which cyber attacks happen. They begin, and it's also sort of the way in to the back-end infrastructure. I mean, again, we've been talking about DDoS. That doesn't really get you a foothold inside the organization, but a phishing email potentially does. Everyone uses email. It's the number one way we communicate. It's the number one, app within organizations, and it's the number one vector by which companies are attacked, or at least attacks begin. Phishing attacks are ubiquitous. They're everywhere. They're targeting all kinds of companies. Again, no one's immune from this. And the problem is difficult because, you're getting multiple hundreds, sometimes thousands of emails in your inbox every month. Which one is a phishing email? It's very hard to determine. The bad guys are getting better at crafting the emails to look legit. They used to be real easy to spot because the English was bad or the graphics didn't look good, but now they're very sophisticated in terms of mimicking legitimate websites.
One of the things that I've been impressed with is the move to edge computing in there. And maybe we can give the audience a little definition of this, but it has special security needs, doesn't it?
Well, for sure. The edge, if we use that term, it usually refers to the edge of the internet, meaning near where the end users are, near the consumer of the website. The origin tends to be the site itself, and the edge is where you and I sit when we're sitting in front of our laptop. Edge can mean a number of things in that context. I mean, in terms of, again, Cloudflare's origin story, some of what we did was help not only protect websites, but make websites more performant and make them perform more scalably. And by putting assets near the edge, we were able to deliver content better. And that's what a CDN is. But now security is moving to the edge, again, because of the distributed nature of work and where workers live and work. They are more mobile than ever. They're in airports, they're in hotels, they're in their home offices. And so we need to think about security for end users in that same context, and edge security. As the cloud has taken on a bigger and bigger role in our lives, and as companies have moved more and more infrastructure to SaaS and cloud providers, those are now creating a situation where we don't really have an easily definable corporate edge anymore. The old edge used to be the firewall. That was the perimeter or the boundary around the organization. But now the edge is the internet. And the internet is the new corporate network. So now we have to start thinking about how to protect users wherever they are.
We were talking about APIs earlier at DDoS, and you made my mind light up and think about it in a new way. But APIs and interconnectivity certainly have a huge cybersecurity risk profile for organizations.
They do. APIs are maybe even more important than the website itself, because oftentimes that's where more critical data is interchanged and consumed and published. APIs, behind a mobile app, they could be a banking API. They could have financial information. APIs publishing something in the healthcare industry could have some very sensitive information, things that need to be kept very private. But yet APIs are the way applications communicate with each other. So you can't necessarily just take that data and hide it. You have to actually publish it, but then protect it with some very serious security.
Are there other risks or threats on the horizon that you're seeing in the field that people aren't yet talking about?
While there's a ton of positive associated with artificial intelligence, there's also some blind spots, some negatives, some things that people may not be thinking about. And in the context of cybersecurity, we really have to think about what AI is going to mean. And what my mind starts to go to, where it goes to immediately, is what are the bad guys going to do with this AI? If we're doing really cool things, writing code, creating scripts and whatnot on the positive side, what are the folks doing on the negative side where they're using those same tools to potentially attack us or make a phishing email look more legitimate, more real, or maybe using the tools to be a better social engineer by having a better script that looks more like a real email would look, or a real conversation might appear. So I'm thinking a lot about AI, how we defend against it, how we detect it, and how we use it to build better tools in defense of our applications and APIs.
Yeah, on a phishing level, I can tell you the ability to just go into ChatGPT or any of the tools and say, write an email in the style of is a powerful phishing tool.
Yes, it is, absolutely. And writing code, I mean, the ability to ask ChatGPT to write a script that iterates through a list of domain names. I don't want to give everybody, the recipe for how to carry out an attack, but there are lots of readily available lists of top domains, top IP addresses, whatever, that are hosting applications. And if you're using AI, it's not hard to create some scripts that would give you the best list very quickly, the people that are not very well protected or have certain characteristics, or don't have a particular email phishing protection program in place or DDoS protection in place. I mean, you're going to look for the easy targets, and it makes every attacker, maybe a junior level attacker, or the sort of the person that's just trying things out for the first time, it makes them better, faster, and helps them carry out more advanced attacks sooner.
Let's talk a little bit about how organizations are trying to defend themselves against these threats. What's the best examples you're seeing?
Well, first of all, I think companies need to constantly be challenging their assumptions about how they do security. I mean, you can't assume that what you've done in the past is going to continue to work because of all of the evolution of the tactics and the tools that the bad guys are using. We've also just gone through a global pandemic, and so people are much more likely to be working in a hybrid model or a remote model, or something where they're not necessarily on the corporate network anymore. They're using the internet more than ever before. They're using more devices. You had one computer. Now, how many do most people have if you count the devices and the tablets and the different things that we access application through? So the conditions have changed. We need to reevaluate security. And one of the philosophies that has sort of risen to the top in terms of an approach is zero trust.
So, John, this takes us to a really interesting piece in here, and I'm glad you mentioned zero trust and the confusion about it. But what is zero trust really?
I like to explain zero trust really as a philosophy or an approach to security, rather than trying to call it a product. It's not a product. It's really a philosophy around the assumption that no user or device should be trusted. Historically, we have used network boundaries. Sometimes the trusted folks were inside the network perimeter. The untrusted folks were assumed to be outside. But that model doesn't really work anymore. So we need a new model for security, and we need to apply that model everywhere and to all users and to all applications. And so I think this approach of zero trust has emerged to require strong authentication and authorization for access every single attempt at every single resource, and to apply this idea of least privilege or the principle of least privilege to those accesses that users are attempting, to make sure that we're not enabling an attacker to take advantage of our company, our networks, or our applications.
I'm glad you called it a philosophy, and I love that because it leads to things like this principle of least access and questioning what's happening in the network. And I think that's what people really miss about Zero Trust when we get obsessed with the technical parts of it or stages or phases or whatever, is that it gives us a new look at security that is probably more appropriate for the age that we live in.
That's a fair statement. I think the world has changed quite a bit since the early days, at least of my career. I mean, historically, we did a lot of things on premises in data centers. We had people sitting in office buildings or campuses. And today the world is very different. You know, the pandemic did some of that to us and for us, but we were already on a path of digital transformation. Applications were already moving to the cloud and to SaaS providers. Users were already more mobile than ever before. They were leveraging the VPN more frequently when they were traveling or when they were working remotely. So we need to modernize security to keep up with the way we've been modernizing our approach to infrastructure and application delivery. And so therefore, again, that's where this new approach of Zero Trust has sort of risen to the top in terms of preference. People are trying to think about modernizing security and at the same time improving security posture across the entire spectrum. And I think that's centered on this idea of applying Zero Trust security.
When you think Zero Trust, it forces you to look at things differently. We were talking about VPNs. I was talking to somebody about a VPN the other day, and they said, "Oh, we need a VPN to be secure in getting to our network." I said, "Well, not exactly. The VPN may offer a secure tunnel into your network, but it also offers a huge gaping hole if anybody actually gets access to that VPN."
Yes, it's true. I mean, the VPN is the mechanism, again, that we allow remote users to tunnel or connect back into the corporate network. But then we apply essentially the same security policies as if the user were sitting on the corporate LAN, so to speak. And that's not enough because you don't know who's on the other end of the VPN necessarily. It could be a compromised machine or a compromised device. It could be somebody that's taken over ownership of that. So you have less ability to discern who's trusted and who's not trusted. And then if somebody should gain access via the VPN, they can start to explore the network as if they were on the network. They can start to ping, run port scans, do sort of the same kinds of activities they would do if they had a foothold inside the network. And that's a real risk because that's the MO of the attackers is gain a foothold and then start to see what else you can find on the network. And the VPN doesn't really do much to apply a strong set of policies around that. But Zero Trust does.
Yeah. And a Zero Trust mindset would say, yeah, you can do this. Should you be doing this?
Right. Oh, well, that's true. You could theoretically have the Zero Trust mindset, but then maybe the technology fails you in trying to achieve that goal of Zero Trust. That's maybe what I should have said is the VPN sort of falls down in the implementation stage of Zero Trust because it doesn't give you the granularity of control. It doesn't give you a sort of ongoing authentication and authorization. It's sort of a one-time, are you good or are you not good? And then you're onto the network. And so we need to get better than that.
I know Cloudflare has actually published a roadmap to Zero Trust. It's got 28 steps that I was looking at. It went, a little complex. Oh, and then it said, okay, 4 phases. And I think we're used to those things, the phases and steps. I sort of like the idea, though, that FinOps uses it to crawl, walk, run. And it's not to diminish what you guys have done. I think it's great. But what's a crawl in Zero Trust?
Right. Well, look, we need to first address that everybody's on a different journey, a different path. They're starting from different places. Sometimes big companies have things in place. They're starting from a different point of view than maybe a startup or a small company. So we do need some approach and some roadmap. And so Cloudflare has published that. And that's based on our experience with our own customers and with our own internal Zero Trust journey. And I think the roadmap should give you that sort of crawl, walk, run approach to things. So first of all, starting with just securing the basics, DNS, for example, making sure that that we have a approach that's filtering out known malware at the DNS level. Everybody uses DNS. It's the foundational level, infrastructure that everything else on the internet sort of relies on. So if we can at least do one pass at preventing attacks at the DNS level, and we can apply that universally, then we've made some progress. And as you start to go further, you need to build on those foundational elements. And so we think about the next stage, maybe incorporating security around some more advanced protections of users and applications. To do that, now you have to have some form of identity management infrastructure in place. You have to have sort of a single identity, or at least a centralized identity to manage users and what they should have access to. So that's the next step. The more advanced you go, maybe the harder these things are to deploy. They're a little bit more complicated. Getting to a point where you have all your users inventoried in a single identity platform, all your applications, that requires some work to get that under control. And then applying policy, that becomes sort of the next stage, is figuring out what policies you want to apply to those users and those applications. That becomes a thing that somebody has to sort of think through. And I would say maybe the final is to take it even further and try to extend those kinds of controls everywhere. Every application needs to be sort of protected. Every user needs to be protected. We need to raise the bar in terms of authentication to require phishing-proof multi-factor authentication, so that we can't be spoofed in terms of authentication mechanism. Attackers are really, really intent on getting the credentials of a user so that they can start to exploit those to further their attack inside the organization. So we really need to sort of protect that end user and that end user device. And I think the stages give us a roadmap to do that. Demonstrating leadership, that zero trust, it doesn't mean we don't trust our users. It means we need their help in this journey. Another thing that we speak about leadership a lot in cybersecurity. We all know the common roles and the common functions. One of the predictions that I had going into 2023 is that in order to get zero trust across the finish line, some companies might even appoint a chief zero trust officer. I mean, I know that title may not stick. It's something that's just sort of rattling around in my head, but showing leadership, demonstrating how important it is to the organization, putting somebody in charge of getting to a zero trust stance for your organization, I think is really critical. And whatever you can do, no matter how you demonstrate that to your employees, your stakeholders, it's really critical that somebody sort of stand up and say, we have to get better at this, and we have to do it comprehensively across the entire organization. And we have to do it soon, because the threats are not getting any easier to deal with, and the security challenges are continuing to grow.
Just as we wrap up, I want to just say, what are the things you'd like to leave people with, the points from this that you hope they take away from our talk?
Zero trust is something that can be taken on in sort of bite-sized chunks. You don't have to do all or nothing. You can take what you need from a zero trust architecture. Maybe you're trying to secure in your remote users or contractors or hybrid workers. Start there. Maybe start with your specific applications that need the most security, and then you work your way out. And so it doesn't have to be complicated. You don't have to boil the ocean. It doesn't cost a lot. For small organizations, we offer a lot of services that are literally free. Larger organizations can start to explore those same applications in a smaller context, and then they can expand their use over time. And just get started somewhere. That's what I'd like to say to folks. Get started and get moving.
Can't say it any better. My guest has been John N. Gates, Field CTO for Cloudflare. Thank you, John, for an amazing talk.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate the time.
And for those of you out there, please take a moment and add your comments, your questions, or your opinions to the chat. And feel free to join in, comment on what's being said, or just make contact with someone online. We'll answer as many of these as we can on breaks, but we'll get back to you with an answer if we can't get you today.